Well, let me point out what we talk about. So what you're really sort of saying is, if you're going to be a third platform company, what are the kinds of things or capabilities you need to have in place? And
Right.
let's talk about that.
How do we get started, in other words?
Yeah. So let me. We've got some further slides here that I'll bring up. So the first thing I think is fundamentally and foundationally, this is about business agility. If the danger for IT, I'll tell you. Kind of a funny anecdote. I once talked to a friend of mine who did business strategy for big companies, and I said, "How come there isn't more focus on IT?" And he said, "You know what we think about IT? We think you show up, spout incomprehensible jargon, and ask for huge wads of money. So we hate talking to you."
Right.
And really, what he was saying was IT was viewed as being very self-involved.
Right.
You've got to get the VLAN set up for
its own world.
and not really connected to the business outcomes. So the first thing is this third platform stuff. Whatever you do has to be connected to business outcomes, what we call business agility. So let me focus on this, and you should be seeing a slide come up now that says business agility.
Yep.
Is that true?
I see it.
Okay, good. So a lot of people say, well, one of the things you have to do is you have to bring applications to market faster, and that is absolutely true. That's the foundation of all of this sort of what I would call DevOps movement. And there's no question you need DevOps, right? You've got to be able to get something from the next rev of an application into production in a streamlined fashion.
Faster.
You can't have this kind of, well, it's going to take me 6 weeks to get a new virtual machine, and then I'm going to have to configure it, and then I'm going to build this new rev, and then I'm going to turn it over to somebody else who has to build up a new environment themselves, and then they have to install it. There are organizations, they couldn't update an application more than a couple of times a year because of all of the manual steps. So clearly that's foundation. So I call that time to market acceleration. The whole DevOps, you need a tool chain that supports that. But really, business agility is much more than just I can get stuff to market faster. Although that's crucial. I don't want to make it sound like that's not. But you need to support these new kinds of things like what I'd call experimentation and rapid prototyping. So your capital one, and you say, we've got an opportunity to try out a new offering. Let's just spin it up. Let's get it out there. Let's try it with 5 or 10,000 users in a controlled experiment fashion and see what kind of feedback we get. And the ones that go fast, that get adoption and traction, let's push on those. But the ones that don't, let's let them fade away. So how can we take advantage of resources but also get rid of resources quickly? So experimentation. You need to be able to do rapid prototyping. And let me give you an example again from Capital One. They aren't our only customer. I don't want to make it sound like that, but they're a great, I think, a great exemplar of this kind of third platform transformation. I was talking to one of their folks, and they said, actually, I'm sorry that I'm wrong. This is another company, another customer of ours, which unfortunately I cannot name.
Oh, okay.
I apologize for that, but they're a large wireless company that are well known in the technology industry.
They're a telecom. We would know the name.
Well, I didn't say they were telecom, but they're in the wireless industry.
No, all right.
Anyway, the point is, so you said, what's one of the great things about using your product is it used to be we would have a product manager, and obviously this mobile world, which is part of this third platform, is a huge transformation, huge change. Lots of business opportunities, lots of changing business relationships, lots of partnership opportunities. And so he said, we would have a product manager who would come to us, IT, and say, we've got an opportunity to, do something with a partner, and we want to kind of envision what that would look like. We want to put up together a prototype of, what the application would look like. And he said, we'd sit down with the developer and sort of whiteboard it. And the developer would say, great, I got an idea. They'd go back, they'd request some resources to work on. It would take 6 weeks. They'd have to build up the environment and get it working and all that. That would take a couple of weeks. They'd put together the prototype that would take like a day, and then they'd come back 2 or 3 months later and say, is this what you had in mind? right?
Just
So you can
far too
imagine.
long, really.
Yeah. So he said, what's great about using your product is today we do that whiteboard session. The developer goes off and he or she is back the next day saying, is this what you had in mind?
Right.
So there's kind of rapid prototyping, rapid iteration. That's another aspect of business agility. That's really critical because this is a much faster changing world. And you need to be able to respond much more quickly. So overall DevOps, faster time to market of applications, but also experimentation, rapid prototyping. I just talked about flexible partnering and gave you an example, but for example, turning back to Uber, they're starting to put together things like delivering products, and I think they've had some discussions maybe with Amazon or someone like that. So how do you hook those kinds of things up? So flexible partnering, your systems have to be able to encompass that, develop it quickly, prototype it, and support flexible partnering. And then Internet of Things or also Internet of Service. I mean, Uber is not an Internet of Things. It's a service, but really it is an exemplar of an Internet of Service, right? Because they expose APIs. You could probably start building Uber support or functionality into your product, right? So I've got a service that is maybe you order the product, I can deliver it to you in 4 hours, and I make a call out to Uber to come pick the thing up and deliver it to this address. So the Internet of Things, Internet of Service support, the ability to expose and support APIs, consume APIs, put them into your applications, all really critical for business agility. So this is the first leg of 3 legs. You said, what does it take to be a third platform company? You got to have business agility.
Right.
So this is kind of the output, the outcome, what you want to do. The next thing is, that's fine, but what about the technical side? What do you need from a technical solution to support that business agility? And here's the stuff that we would talk about. Polyglot enablement. It's a world of explosion of languages. And, frankly, an organization that says we're a Java shop and that's what we use, and if you want to come work for us, or if you want to have your code integrated with us or whatever, it's got to be Java. That's like Henry Ford saying, you can have any color Model T you want as long as it's black.
Right.
And that's just an outmoded world. So, the ability to use and support multiple languages that are appropriate for the problem set that you're solving, really critical. And by the way, what I'd say about our customers, we have customers come to us. We're a Java only shop. We need to get better. Within a year, a couple of different ones that we've run stats on, they've gone from single language shops to being 10 different languages or 10 different frameworks that they're using, that they have production apps running on. So, the power of this polyglot stuff is really pretty amazing.
I mean, I think the point on that is, the modern IT world is very much a heterogeneous world. I mean, the conference is called Interop for a reason, because things really do need to interop with each other.
Yeah. So you need DevOps. I've talked about that. You need automation, right? You've got to get manual steps out of the process, and you've got to use common artifacts across all that. So whatever the developer creates, that moves through the entire thing. We happen to use Docker. That's on the next slide. I'll be talking about that. But DevOps automation is all about getting rid of manual steps and using common artifacts. And you need to have automation. And if you don't have that, you don't have a third platform company. You've got a company that's going to be disrupted by a third platform company. API support. That's both consuming and exposing APIs, because that enables integration with other kinds of applications. That enables that flexible partnerships and all that. API support, really, really important. A microservices architecture really supports the rapid iteration, rapid prototyping, and so forth. The monolithic application architectures is really breaking down in the face of this kind of new world. So you need to be able to support creating, managing, monitoring microservices architectures. Super important.
Actually, Barack, we stop for just a second on that. The term microservices is, I think, in terms of my buzzword watch, that particular term is going straight upward in the buzzword cycle.
Yeah.
What exactly is a microservice? Well,
simply put, a microservice tends to be a much smaller unit of functionality being exposed. So let me, a monolithic service is sort of, all of the functionality of our application gets bundled into one executable.
Like the totality of Uber, for example, is the full service.
Yeah, and that would be put into one big application deliverable, right? Okay. So, kind of like a WebSphere or WebLogic application. Typically, you bundle all of the code into a single executable.
Right.
And the shortcomings of that are that, one, every time anybody wants to change anything about the application, you've got to reintegrate all this stuff to make sure it still operates properly, right? You put in a change, does it still work with everybody else's code? So no matter how small the change, you've basically got a big integration overhead. So that makes it difficult. But also it's very difficult to manage that because, I want to scale my application. Well, I got to scale all of that, even if the only one little part of it's being, maybe if people are just, calling, checking to see what the availability of an Uber taxi is, they're going to go through all the code's going to exercise. So it's very difficult. It's also quite difficult to update the individual services because, again, you got to do all this integration. So microservices says, instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break all this functionality. I'm going to decompose this large monolith into many, many collaborating services. And that way I can update the, display what the taxi availability is service without affecting everything else. Yes. And I don't have to worry about that one operating properly.
So it's much more agile then.
Well, it definitely enables agile stuff. By the way, we have a whole thing on microservices, and if you ever want to do a return engagement of this thing, be happy to go through an entire session on microservices. It's a very interesting trend, very important. I mean, it's sort of now maybe being a little bit oversold, or kind of it's going to solve every problem.
It's very hype worthy at this point.
It brings its own challenges, no question. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. But I would say that to be able to be a third platform company, you got to have that in place. You're not going to do it with these monolithic things, I believe. Mm-hmm. Blue-green deployment is a way of deploying new functionality and making sure that it operates properly. So I talked about Capital One. They might bleed something out and expose it to 10 or 20,000 customers. That's the mode that they do it with, this kind of blue-green deployment. And it's a way to validate functionality, and then gradually grow it and expose it to more and more of your customer base, and do that in a controlled fashion. The old monolithic thing was much more sort of, it's either version 1 or version 2. I can't sort of say I want to run version 1 for 90% of the users, but I want to expose version 2 to 10% to make sure it works properly, to make sure they're happy and so forth. So blue-green deployment, very important. Application scaling elasticity, this is absolutely crucial because guess what? A lot more people are using Uber, right after work than are using it at 2 in the afternoon. Right. Well, their application has to be able to grow and shrink. So application scaling elasticity. Cloud is typically a component of this, I would say. Very common underpinning for that, so you need to have that. And I would say really this is platform as a service capability. And you and I were talking before we got on, launched this, about platforms as a service. And, there's people who go, well, maybe I just, I don't want to use PaaS, but I want to have the following, 8 things available in my application. And kind of at the end of the day, what they've really described is platforms as a service. So, maybe if really it's sort of saying, I need to have an application framework that supports rapid development, quick deployment, all of this functionality above here, versioning and so forth. You need platform as a service functionality. Maybe you don't call it PaaS. We believe, my company, we're a Cloud Foundry distribution. We think Cloud Foundry is going to be the victor in all of the PaaS stuff because it's got the biggest ecosystem. It's open source based and so forth. We would say that's the right.
Wait, you're claiming that Cloud Foundry is going to overtake, say, the Azure PaaS offering?
Well, yeah, ultimately, I mean, I think Azure is, well, .NET is a fantastic environment, and Microsoft has a huge developer base, but it certainly isn't the totality of developers. And there's an increasing affinity in enterprises for open source based solutions. In fact, I wrote about that in my most recent blog on CIO, and I don't know if you do show notes or something like that, but you can find that blog post. Enterprises are increasingly preferring that, and so I think that Cloud Foundry is going to have a phenomenal presence long term inside enterprise IT, for because it provides all this kind of capability of all these bullet points up above that I just went through, and it's open source, so there's less of the proprietary lock-in. It's more cost effective. So yeah, I think Cloud Foundry's got an incredible future.
Okay.
And that's what we believe. So that's why we support our product on it. That's why we based our product on it. So let's talk about the third aspect. So we just talked about technical innovation in terms of the way you write, deploy, manage applications and so forth. Excuse me. The third leg of the stool is infrastructure choice. The reality for enterprises is they run in multiple environments. There is no, you know, back in the day, maybe you found people saying, I'm an IBM shop. Nobody does that anymore. They're an everything shop. And so you've got to expect your application to be running in many environments, some on-premise, some in a public cloud provider, and probably across multiple cloud providers and maybe multiple on-premise clouds, right? It's kind of a hodgepodge. And so you need a third platform solution that can support all those environments. Before we got on, you said, well, maybe what about PaaS? Maybe somebody would just use Amazon, and that's
Right.
Amazon's fantastic product, no doubt about it. I wrote a whole book about it, so obviously I have enormous respect for it. But no enterprise is going to say every application we have runs on Amazon. So you need a solution that can span all these environments. We think that containers and in particular Docker is the right foundation for that. It's a application execution environment that can be supported across all these environments. It's sort of the lingua franca of execution, and we support
Do you
that.
think, by the way, that the Rocket container technology will give Docker for a run for money, or will Docker be predominant?
Well, to me, product victors are based on the size of the ecosystem.
Right.
And right now, Docker has a very large and growing ecosystem. I don't know if Docker will be the one that'll ultimately win, but right now it's clearly in the lead.
Right.
So that's why we've chosen to use it. We were the first commercial software solutions shipping with Docker support, and we use Docker. So we think it's a great, and it solves that problem of how do I have a common execution environment across all these different environments, and that's why we use that. So we think Docker Foundation. You could say Container Foundation, and absolutely that's the case. It's got to be container based, I think.
Right.
And Docker right now is the right solution for that. You want it to be language and stack neutral. It can't dictate, you can use RPaaS as long as you use, are locked into this environment. You need to be able to support any language, any stack. It's got to be lightweight hybrid cloud. And this is a little bit more complex technically, but one solution for hybrid cloud is kind of down at the infrastructure layer, and you basically use the APIs of the cloud providers and use them to build up their individual virtual machines, and then you load in the code for those things all in an automated fashion. And you can do that. I mean, I came from a company that did that. The challenge is that's a lot of heavyweight lifting to really get to what you really want, which is application portability. And if you use the container-based solutions and a PaaS layer, it provides this kind of what I call lightweight hybrid cloud, because you can basically take the same application. I mean, for our product, you can take the same thing you developed on a developer's laptop and deploy it into all the environments we support. So it's very lightweight, and you don't have to do a lot of rework. You don't have to create new virtual machines to be able to run it on, Amazon or vSphere or something like that. So lightweight hybrid cloud.
Well, to clarify on that, when you talk about the hybrid cloud, I assume you mean the public and private united, but then there's some people who say private is going to fade away as public becomes ever more dominant. I mean, do you buy that one?
Well, in my opinion, enterprises are always going to have a mix. And so the question really is about what's the portfolio makeup? What proportion of applications run internally, what proportion run externally?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the answer to that is. Is it 80-20 one way or the other? Not sure. Is it 60-40? I think the right answer, if you're an enterprise, is, I don't want I want to be able to make that choice based on what's right for a given application. And so you want a lightweight hybrid sort of solution. You don't want to be sort of, and by late binding deployment, what I mean, what that phrase means is you don't even really want to be able to have to choose at the day that you start designing the application. Oh, well, this is going to be an Amazon application. Well, what happens if all of a sudden Amazon starts competing with you and you go, I don't want to run my business in Amazon Web Services? You don't want to be in a place where you go, well, now I got to rewrite the whole thing. You want to have a solution that says, I can design and build my application, test it, have it ready to go, and then decide where I'm going to deploy it. And that's late binding deployment. And so I think organizations are going to have a mix of portfolio where they deploy things. It's unclear today what the proportions of those will be. I'm pretty sure that they'll always have both on-prem and off-prem. And you want a PaaS solution that supports all those and doesn't restrict you from that. And then you need common application design and operations. I already talked about the application design. You know, you want to be able to design it once and have it operate in all the environments that are supported. And you want to have a common operational model. So you go, you know, because one of the things we didn't just mention about hybrid is there are applications that will probably run in both, right? Some portion of it will. And so you want to have a common operations model, because you don't want to say, well, half my application is running in Amazon, so all of my logging and all of my monitoring is for that part's in the Amazon wing of my NOC, and all the stuff that runs internally is in the vSphere wing of my NOC. And now how do I figure out, how do I cross correlate? How do I find root causes?
Well, I think the ideal model for that is that there's going to be a seamless world between those two. So there's really not going to be much of a difference looking way ahead.
Right. And to do that, you need common application design and operations. And that's really what you need from an infrastructure choice. So sort of, you know, summing up, you need business to be a third platform company. You need business agility, you need technical innovation, you need infrastructure choice, and you need some kind of environment that makes that all seamless and fast. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, obviously we'd love it if you chose Staccato, which is our product, but you need some environment. And so the choice that for enterprises is, this is the direction I got to move in. I can't stick with what worked perfectly well a decade ago or 15 years ago. That's way outmoded in a third platform world. If I'm going to be competing with Uber or Airbnb or Udacity or whoever it might be, I've got to be a lot faster. I need something that, you know, walks and talks and what's the word about the duck thing? If it
walks like a duck and talks like a duck.
Yeah, it's a duck. You need something that's like a pass. I had an interesting conversation with a guy who's pretty well known in this area, a guy named Jeff Susna at Velocity last week.
Oh yeah.
And he said, you know, the thing is, a lot of people go, I'll just start with Docker. I'll just use Docker containers.
Right.
And he said, you know, the thing is, you start with Docker, and then you say, well, I need monitoring. And you start finding a solution for that. And I need management, and I need a solution for that. And I want to do some kind of, auto scaling, and I want a solution for that. Because by the time you're done doing that, it kind of looks like a PaaS.
Right.
So, you know, whatever you call it, you need that kind of functionality. And that's what we'd say.